Welcome, my dear guests, to the captivating expanses of my story.
Chapter 6. The shimmering blue hyperspace window collapsed, revealing 3 glistening suns on the horizon. The EK Equinox glided majestically out of the transition, while its sensor array recorded the first data from the Polaris system. Mariana Martin leaned forward in her command chair. Her fingers drummed a nervous rhythm on the armrest. The 3 suns of the system were reflected in the polished displays of the bridge consoles. Status of the primary system. Systems nominal. Hyperspace drive shutting down on schedule, reported Lieutenant Schwann from the navigation console. Her eyes flitted over the scrolling data columns. Dr. Bergmann stood hunched over her science station, her fingers flying over the holo interface. Fascinating. The gravimetric interference patterns of the 3 stars create a complex resonance field. No wonder our long-range sensors were blocked. Anna Sean readjusted the sensor array. The holographic system map before her flickered and updated with new details every second. I'm detecting massive interference in subspace. The data is specify strange, Lieutenant, Martin demanded. Her gaze followed the system data that was building up. Anna Sean's hands froze over the console. A red warning symbol pulsed through the holographic display. The sensor patterns, they are adapting. With each scan, the encryption changes, as if something is actively working against our evaluations. Dr. Bergmann hurried to Sean's station. Her eyes widened at the sight of the writhing data patterns. These adaptations follow a clear logic. These are not natural interferences. Show me the raw data, Martin ordered, activating the display on her armrest. Geometric shapes danced across the screen. Lieutenant Schwann turned from the navigation. The main sensors are being systematically jammed. We're practically blind. Mariana Martin leaned back in her chair, her fingers interlaced. The 3 suns cast their ghostly light through the bridge window. Prepare the autonomous sensor platforms. If anyone actively blocks us, we'll have to scan the system decentrally. Platforms are operational, Son reported. Standard distribution. Negative. Martin shook his head. Thus ascend now deploy 1 platform at each of the planet's Lagrange points. Also a row in the outer asteroid belt. Passive sensors. No. Dr. Bergmann nodded approvingly. Clever idea. Several small sensors are harder to jam than our main sensor array. Sensor platforms are being launched, Sean confirmed. The status displays documented the launch of the small reconnaissance drones. Data to first data transmissions. 20 minutes navigation bring us to a stable position on the system's edge, Martin ordered. We'll stay here until we know what we're up against. The EK Equinox glided gently forward, propelled by its maneuvering thrusters. The hum of the engines vibrated through the deck as the sensor platforms moved away from the ship like glowing dots. First platform reached position, Sean reported. A green marker appeared on the tactical display. Passive sensors online begin data collection. Mariana Martin watched the expanding sensor platforms on the display. They covered the system like a spider's web of technological threads. Somewhere out there was the source of the interference. They just had to be patient enough to find it. The bridge's main screen showed the first high-resolution images of Polaris IV. The planet's frozen surface shimmered like polished obsidian in the faint light of the 3 suns. Ice crystals reflected the light in prismatic patterns that stretched across the rugged landscape. Dr. Erika Bergmann leaned over her console as her fingers glided across the hull panel. The surface temperature is minus 230 degrees Celsius. A kilometer-thick layer of ice covers the planet. She projected a 3-dimensional planet model in the center of the bridge. The composition is interesting. There are massive deposits of frozen gases under the ice layer. Anna-san studied the probe's telemetry data. The moon shows similar characteristics, but its orbit is remarkably unstable. She marked the moon's trajectory with a bright red line. The gravitational influences of the three suns distort its orbit in a constantly changing pattern. The three-body problem in its purest form. Mariana Martin stepped closer to the hologram. The chaotic lines of motion of the celestial bodies formed a complex network of overlapping orbits. In most systems, we can precisely predict the movements of the bodies, but here she pointed to the wildly oscillating orbits of the asteroids. Here we have a perfect example of deterministic chaos. Lieutenant Schwann activated another layer of the projection. The asteroids appear to be markers for the gravitational vortices. Do you see this formation? She drew an arc through a group of boulders. They move like flotsam in a tidal current. The math behind it is fascinating. Dr. Bergmann projected a series of equations next to the model. The classic solution approaches fail here. Each of the three stars exerts different forces that are constantly changing. And that's what makes this system so dangerous. Mariana stroked a stray strand of hair out of her. The navigation systems have to be constantly recalibrated. A single calculation error could be fatal. On the main screen now showed a new image of the probe. Polaris rotated slowly on its axis, while its moon described a complex ellipse. The asteroids near it moved like dancers in a cosmic ballet, their orbits a living testament to the relentless mathematics of the universe. Dr. Bergmann manipulated the hologram and enlarged the image of Polaris IV. The planet's axis of rotation appeared as a glowing blue line at a steep angle to the orbital plane. This axis tilt is extraordinary. Her fingers danced over the controls as additional data layers overlaid the model. 50 degrees of tilt, more than twice that of most habitable planets. Mariana Martin slowly circled the hologram. The planet's extreme tilt made it almost surreal, as if it were tumbling on its side through space. What effect does that have on the surface? On extreme seasons, if you can even speak of them, with an orbit of 1,300 standard years, Dr. Bergmann programmed a time-lapse sequence. The simulation showed how different areas of the planet were alternately exposed to triple starlight. The poles receive intense irradiation for centuries, while other regions are in complete darkness. Lieutenant Schwann studied the orbital mechanical data, so a complete orbit takes longer than the entire recorded history of the Empire. The length of the orbit is a direct result of the free body dynamics. Dr. Bergmann projected the planet's complex orbit. The gravitational forces of the three suns force Polaris IV into an extremely wide orbit. The high axial tilt additionally amplifies the chaotic elements of the motion. And a sun marked an area on the planet's surface. The temperature differences between the day and night sides must be enormous. Even through the thick layer of ice, the thermal stresses are tearing the crust apart. Dr. Bergmann enlarged a section of the surface. Deep cracks ran through the ice like a spiderweb of black lines. Some of these canyons are several kilometers deep. In some places, material from the planet's interior probably seeps to the surface. Mariana looked at the rugged landscape. The vast cracks formed geometric patterns that stretched across entire continents. A planet torn apart by its suns, not just by the suns. Dr. Bergmann pointed to the unstable moon. The variable tidal effect of the moon adds another layer of deformation. The entire system is in a state of permanent tectonic activity. Towards the bridge's analysis displays bathed Dr. Bergmann's face in a kaleidoscopic play of colors. Her fingers danced across the holographic console as the first sensor data from Polaris E came in. The scientist leaned closer to the displays, her eyes widening. Mariana, you have to see this. She projected the data onto the main screen. The gas giant is exceeding all our expectations. Mariana Martin rose from her command chair and stood next to Doc. The massive gas planet filled the screen, its turbulent atmosphere shimmering in surreal hues. Purple storm bands crisscrossed the surface, interspersed with emerald green swirls and golden brightenings, where the light from the three suns penetrated the various layers of gas. The mass is more than twice that of Odin, explained Anna San from her sensor station. The gravitational values are impressive, and look at those Trojan asteroids, dozens trapped in stable Lagrange. Lieutenant Schwann adjusted the tactical sensors. The gravitational effects of the three-body system have left clear traces here. The Trojan's orbit shows chaotic patterns. The two moons are more interesting, Dr. Bergmann said as he enlarged the images of the satellites. Massive rocky worlds, each larger than Kasach, orbit the gas giant in complex, intricate orbits. A delicate ring of ice and rock shimmered between them like a cosmic jewel. Thus the atmosphere contains unusual compounds. Dr. Bergmann analyzed the spectroscopic data. These color effects are caused by the interaction of different gases with the radiation from the three suns. I've never seen anything like it. Mariana observed the hypnotic movements in the gas giant's atmosphere. Slowly rotating bands merged into new patterns while storm vortices the size of entire continents pulsed through the various layers. Light from the three suns refracted in the gas clouds, creating a phantasmagorical spectacle of merging colors. The data shows strong magnetic anomalies, reported Anna Shan. The interaction with the moons is creating massive plasma arcs. The entire system is one big electromagnetic mess. Point the long-range sensors at the Lagrange points between the moons, Mariana instructed. With this gravitational constellation, there could be stable zones there. Thus, the high-resolution images of the two moons appeared on the bridge's main screen. Dr. Bergmann enlarged the images of the rugged surfaces. Craters some several hundred kilometers in diameter littered both satellites like pockmarks. The inner moon is geologically active. Dr. Bergmann marked pulsating energy signatures on her console. The tidal forces of the gas giant have heated the entire crust. The surface is a single network of lava flows and Mariana bent over the data. In the thermal images, the inner moon glowed in bright red tones. Cracks crisscrossed its surface like glowing veins from which molten rock oozed. Volcanic activity constantly deformed and erased the few recognizable craters. The surface temperature is over 800 degrees Celsius, reported Anasan from the sensor station. The moon is constantly regenerating its surface through volcanic processes. The tidal forces are pumping enormous amounts of energy into its core. Lieutenant Schwann switched to the images of the outer moon. In contrast to its glowing neighbor, this satellite appeared like a lifeless desert of ice. Deep craters and jagged mountain ranges stood out sharply against the pale surface. The outer moon is the complete opposite. Dr. Bergmann analyzed the data. A frozen wasteland. The surface temperature is minus 180 degrees. The craters are ancient, some probably as old as the moon itself. Mariana studied the bizarre formations. Unlike the inner moon, eons of meteorite impacts had left their mark here. Some craters overlapped to form complex patterns, while huge ejecta blankets surrounded others. The impact craters tell a story of constant bombardment. Dr. Bergmann marked different types of craters. These structures were formed over millions of years. The moon was like a cosmic target for asteroids and comets. And the differences between the two moons are fascinating. Anasion projected a direct comparison of the surface structures. One is boiling, the other is frozen, and it's all down to their different positions with the gas giant. Lieutenant Schwann adjusted the sensors for a more detailed analysis. The surface of the outer moon shows no signs of tectonic or volcanic activity. It is a dead world, preserved in eternal ice. Above the Equinox map table danced a shimmering image of the asteroid belt, a circular band of countless points of light. The remarkable glow of the image drew shadows on Dr. Bergmann's tense face as she navigated through the hologram with practiced movements, bringing up isolated chunks for detailed inspection. This composition surprises me. Her words echoed muffled in the silence of the command brig. A distribution of nickel iron and the crystalline formations indicate destroyed planetary cores. Mariana Martin leaned towards the floating display, her gaze fixed on a conspicuously compacted collection of rock. In the background, the steady hum of the onboard systems wove a technical soundscape. Can we determine the number of source bodies? She divided the display into chromatic zones with a quick button press. Anna-san spoke up from sensor control. Detailed spectral data flickered on her terminal. The isotope distribution suggests 3 separate planetary masses, and when I look at these complex gravitational equations, exhausted, she massaged her temples. The tidal forces of Polaris, I have shredded the original orbits. A discrete signal tone announced incoming readings. Lieutenant Schwan initiated an additional visualization of the gravitational fields of the 3 suns. A mesh of crimson, azure, and gold lines of force merged into a hypnotic pattern. The perfect example of the 3-body problem. Dr. Bergmann pointed to the turbulent interference of the gravitational fields. A stable planetary orbit was impossible under these conditions. The tidal forces. Mariana started the time-lapse. They watched the cosmic dance of destruction. 3 enormous celestial bodies torn apart by the conflicting gravitational forces of the 3 suns, their collision leaving behind nothing but a veil of debris and metal shards. An equally impressive and disturbing spectacle. Schwann's tone betrayed deep thoughtfulness, a vivid demonstration of the unpredictability of multiple systems. The view focused on a massive chunk of asteroid. Its rough surface bore the scars of countless collisions, and the cool rock mass formed surreal landscapes. Dr. Bergmann marked specific areas of the surface. These liquefaction marks are not only caused by the impacts. The fluctuating radiation intensity of the 3 suns probably caused violent temperature jump. Anna combed through the measurement logs. The spatial arrangement of the fragments precisely follows the theoretical predictions of the 3-body problem, a prime example of the material consequences of chaotic systems. Anna-san adjusted the sensor settings of her station. The spectral analysis of a particularly massive asteroid showed unusual patterns, and her fingers drummed nervously on the console. Dr. Bergmann, something is wrong here. She projected the data onto the main screen. These hollows, the surface shows clear traces of plasma cutters. Dr. Bergmann navigated the hologram to the marked coordinates. The jagged asteroid's surface revealed geometric incisions which were too precise for natural processes, industrial mining methods. Her voice sounded strained. Mariana, take a look at these structures. The cutting angles correspond exactly to the standard patterns of mining lasers. Mariana Martin leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the projected details. Scan the scan area. I want to know how far these activities extend. The hologram zoomed out. Dozens more asteroids lit up in the display, marked with similar mining patterns. Pieces of metal floated between the rocks, bent steel girders, shredded solar panels, destroyed processing plants, an entire mine complex. Lieutenant Schwan marked debris fields. The equipment was torn apart. The material fatigue indicates centuries of exposure. Dr. Bergmann examined a particularly large fragment. This alloy, high-strength duranium, the standard for mining equipment before the Third Imperial War. The equipment shows signs of overuse. Anna enlarged the detailed scans of a shattered reactor core, as if it had been left running until the last moment, with no regard for maintenance cycles. Mariana activated the depth scans. Tunnels and shafts ran through the surface of the larger asteroids like veins through rock. Some chunks were almost completely hollowed out, just thin shells of their original mass. Systematic overexploitation. Dr. Bergmann marked the mining patterns. They have exploited the valuable mineral veins to the last remnant. The structural integrity of the asteroids was completely ignored. Mariana studied the overlapping layers of data. Her trained eye immediately grasped the significance of the readings. An Einstein-Rosen bridge, she murmured. A natural wormhole. Impossible, breathed Lieutenant Schwann from the navigation station. She turned around in her chair, her eyes wide. The probability of encountering a naturally stabilized wormhole is astronomically low. Dr. Bergmann completed the sentence. Her voice vibrated with excitement. But the data is clear. The quantum signatures, the gravitational anomalies, everything points to it. Mariana stepped closer to the hologram. The pulsating anomaly cast dancing shadows on her face. Lieutenant Sane, start a full spectral analysis. Dr. Bergmann, I want a detailed analysis of all gravitational data. She turned to Lieutenant Schwann. Calculate a safe course for the sensor drones. We need to learn more about this phenomenon. The bridge filled with the clicking of consoles and the hurried tapping of displays. The crew worked with the precise efficiency of a welcome. The 3 suns of the Polaris system could be seen through the huge panoramic windows of the bridge, their merging coronae forming a glistening arc on the horizon. The first analyses are coming in, Sean reported. Her fingers flew over the console. The energy signature is stable, with no signs of fluctuation. The wormhole seems to have existed for a very long time. Mariana Martin bit her lip. The discovery of a natural wormhole was astronomical, but without the necessary equipment, they could only study the phenomenon from a safe distance. Her eyes wandered over the pulsating holograms showing the stable Einstein-Rosen portal at the system's edge. Dr. Bergmann, what do the gravity sensors tell us about the orientation of the tunnel? The scientist scrolled through the data streams on her tablet. The bluish light from the displays made her eyes light up. The curvature of space-time indicates a stable entrance here in the Polaris system. But where the exit leads? She shrugged her shoulders. We can't possibly determine that without further investigation. The sensor drones are providing further data. Anna Sien reported from her station. Her fingers danced over the holographic controls. The quantum signatures are stable. This wormhole has probably existed for eons. Mariana rubbed her temples. The thought that they could not continue to explore one of the most important astronomical discoveries of the last century gnawed at her. The EK Equinox was a research vessel, but it lacked the special equipment for safe passage through a wormhole. Lieutenant Schwann marked the position in our navigation data. Highest priority, she stepped closer to the tactical display and calculate a safe perimeter. I don't want civilian ships venturing too close to the anomaly. Already on it, Commander. Swan nodded without lifting her eyes from her console. The gravitational distortions are measurable within a radius of 2 million kilometers. I recommend a safety distance of at least 3 million. Dr. Bergmann leaned against her station, her eyes sparkling with scientific curiosity. The stability is remarkable. Most theoretical models predict that natural wormholes should collapse within a fraction of a second, but this shows no signs of instability. Sean completed. The energy signatures are constant, the quantum fluctuations minimal. Mariana crossed her arms. She could sense her crew's frustration. Dr. Bergmann's burning desire to explore was almost palpable, but without proper precautions, Any attempt to investigate the wormhole further would be irresponsible. Lieutenant Sane, transmit a full scan to Fleet Command. Mark the data as top priority. She took a deep breath. Dr. Bergmann, I want a detailed report on all the readings. The wormhole isn't going anywhere. We have time to study it thoroughly. A bluish glow of the main consoles broke the darkness of space. Dr. Bergmann leaned over her station as her fingers glided over the tactile interface. The sensor data from the approaching probe streamed across her screen in a steady flow. First atmospheric data coming in, she murmured, more to herself than to the others. The scientist brushed an unruly gray strand from her face. Mostly nitrogen-oxygen mix, but there's something strange. Mariana Martin stepped up beside her, her boots echoing dully on the metal floor of the bridge. The azure displays reflected in her dark eyes. Define, strange, Doctor. The atmospheric composition. It fluctuates in patterns I've never seen before. Dr. Bergmann projected the data onto the main screen. Complex waveforms pulsed across the display. Anacene leaned back in her pilot's seat, her arms crossed in front of her chest. Could this be related to the three suns? The radiation profiles are pretty chaotic. Possibly. Lieutenant Schwann scrolled through the gravitational measurements. The tidal forces are extremely complex. 3 suns, 4 planets. That makes a gravitational web like a spider's web. The probe plunged deeper into the atmosphere. New data flowed over the screens. Dr. Bergmann's eyes widened. Captain, look at this. The oceans, they cover almost 80% of the surface. Dr. Bergmann was engrossed in analyzing the ocean world when suddenly red warning symbols flickered across her screen. The sensor displays exploded with new signatures. Captain, massive energy bursts at the Lagrange points. Her voice almost broke. On the main screen, 8 warships materialized out of their angular silhouettes stood out darkly against the starry sky, and the alien hulls shimmered in a dull metallic gray. Anna Shawn jumped to her tactical console. By mass assignment, I classify 3 cruisers and 5 destroyers. The designs, they don't match any known configuration. Energy signatures are increasing, Lieutenant Schwann warned. They're activating weapons systems. Bright energy discharges flashed from the cruisers to the probe, and the small reconnaissance apparatus disappeared in an explosion of glistening plasma. Probe lost, Dr. Bergmann stated soberingly. Fragments of data were still streaming across her screen. The last telemetry data shows the ships, they were there all the time, cloaked and active, waiting. Mariana Martin's voice cut through the chaos on the bridge. Evasive maneuvers. Shawn, emergency transmission to Fleet Command. They just destroyed an Imperial research apparatus without warning. An automated defense fleet. Dr. Bergmann scrolled frantically through the latest data received. The energy signatures are similar to those from the Showu system. A comparable technology. The cruisers are changing form. Schwann's fingers flew over the tactical displays. They're moving to an intercept position. Captain, the destroyers are accelerating to attack vector. A metallic taste of adrenaline spread through Mariana's mouth as the alien warships took up their deadly formation. The cold, recycled air of the bridge felt thin, almost as if the oxygen was being sucked out of the room. Battle stations, shields at maximum. Her voice echoed through the tense silence of the bridge. The familiar hum of power redistribution vibrated through the deck. Shawn, stand by for an emergency jump. Swan, Commander, the hyperspace engine is only 30% charged. Anna Shawn's fingers flew over the navigation console. Sweat glistened on her forehead. A jump could cause critical damage. The enemy cruisers moved like predatory fish, their weapons pulsing with charged energy. Dr. Bergmann bent over her sensors. The ships are using missiles. They probably want to saturate our defenses. Our shields will withstand a maximum of 2 direct hits. Mariana's fingers dug into the armrests of her command chair. The only alternative was certain death for her crew. Sean, prepare an emergency spur. Coordinates. Ledon system right on the outer perimeter. Aye, Commander. Sean frantically programmed the escape route. Thrusters at 32%. A bright beam of energy flashed from one of the alien destroyers. Lieutenant Schwann jerked the Equinox into a sharp, evasive turn as the decoys exploded in a cascade of electromagnetic interference. Enemy ships are charging again. Dr. Bergmann's voice almost cracked. Engine at 35%, Sean reported. Commander, a jump with this charge will burn out the coils. We risk a complete system failure. A second energy beam cut through space. This time it grazed the Equinox's shields. The ship shuddered under the force of the impact. Sirens wailed. Shields at 60%. Schwann stabilized the spinning ship. Mariana made her decision. Emergency jump. Now. Reality tore itself apart around her. A deafening screech filled the bridge as overloaded coils buckled. Red warning lights flashed from all the consoles. Hyperspace seemed to protest as the Equinox forcibly made its way through space-time. Drive section reporting critical overload. Sean struggled with the wildly swinging controls. Coils 7 through 12 burned out. We're losing transition control. Mariana felt her stomach turn as the ship lurched through hyperspace like a wounded animal. The engine overload was tearing at the hull's structural integrity, and metal plates groaned under the immense strain. Dr. Bergmann clung to a station. The hull is still holding, but the stress will tear us apart if we don't return to normal space. Mariana activated the emergency protocol on her command console. The bridge's red emergency light bathed everything in a surreal glow as the ship spun in hyperspace. All stations donned spacesuits. Now, her voice cut through the screech of the overloaded coils. Engineering teams Alpha and Beta to the propulsion section. Gamma team to hull inspection. Dr. Bergmann reached under her station and tugged out her spacesuit. The carbon fabric crackled as she slipped into the suit. Structural stress is reaching critical levels. Deck 3 is reporting micro cracks in the cross struts. Lieutenant Schwann activated the magnetic soles of her suit. The muffled clacking echoed through the bridge as she checked the helmet seals. Stabilizers are operating at 200%. The bearings won't last long. Hyperspace tugged at the Equinox like a beast at its prey. Mariana's fingers slid over the tactical display. Sean, channel all available power into structural reinforcement. Swan, reduce transit speed by 30%. Speed reduce. Swan adjusted controls through the bulky gloves of her suit. That'll buy the repair team some time. The comm system crackled. Engineering to bridge. Coils 7 to 12 completely burned out. We're trying an emergency circuit via the secondary system. Acknowledged engineering. Mariana activated ship-wide communications. Shut down all non-essential systems. Concentrate power on life support and structural integrity. Dr. Bergmann analyzed the incoming data on her display. The emergency circuit is working. Transit stability at 40% and rising. Another vibration ran through the ship. Sparks sprayed from a broken relay station, and the acrid smell of scorched insulation permeated the suit's air filters. Gamma team reports multiple hull breaches in Section 4C, San reported. The emergency seal is holding, but we're losing it. Mariana activated her station's backup systems. Evacuate the damaged sections. All non-essential crew members to the emergency shelters. Minor, how long until egress? At current course, Dr. Bergmann calculated hastily, 17 minutes to the exit deck. If the emergency circuit holds. The Equinox groaned under the hyperspace forces. Mariana's suit registered another pressure drop. The repair teams worked feverishly in the damaged sections as the ship struggled through the torn hyperspace.
Hey, I would be happy if you could give my video a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my